Okay, thank you very much. Erev Tov, wow. I am overwhelmed with the effort that's being made this evening. Uh, I, it, I just had to, I was very amused today. I spoke to my daughter in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I said, "Oh, it's freezing over here." She said, "Abba," she said, "I've got 15 degrees, it's Fahrenheit, on my register over there. You're not freezing, I'm freezing," she said. And she was absolutely right. So I'm not complaining. She would gladly get our 50 degrees and be very happy with it. Yeah. No, you have to say that. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to make a dedication of the shiur. There was a yortzeit, not sure when it was, maybe Yona will, just came in. Yortzeit Shel Mervin, Zayah HaShavua, Rosh Chodesh, Etmol. Just to mention the passing now, what is it, 3 years of really very, very special person who we became very friendly with already in London. This is going back more than 30 years. Mervyn Warner, who Yona's husband, Zichrono Livracha, who was a teacher wherever he went, teacher here, teacher in London, and was a very good friend. As I came from Scotland, so my only complaint, as I always told Mervyn, was that he needed to walk around with subtitles. Because when you hear Scottish people talk, don't know what, pardon the expression, don't know what the blazers are talking about. But it doesn't matter because he was such a lovely, delicious person that I forgave him his accent completely. But a very, very special person, really very, very missed, and Tehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be for a blessing. Oh gosh, chapter 17 of Shmuel Aleph. As I said to Joni just now, those who have the book, and I'm sorry, I would have had more books to possibly distribute or whatever, but I'm getting some tomorrow. The book really summarizes in its own way why chapter 17, Perek Yud Zayin, is so crucial. It really is the fulcrum. It's the balance point, the absolute center, not only of the Sefer Shmuel Aleph, but really of the whole narrative of Shmuel Aleph. What do I mean by that? Till now, we've been learning about Shaul. We've been doing the life of Shaul. We've been doing the ups and downs of Shaul, the trials and tribulations, the fact that he failed so significantly with the story of Amalek. It's all very, very powerful what we've done till now. Last time we transitioned into the world of David, not directly, but kind of indirectly, and he was anointed in a private ceremony. So this is not public knowledge in any way whatsoever at the moment. You'll see by the end of chapter 17, Shaul realizes who the new successor to the throne really is, and that's a very significant moment of the changeover from the dynasty or the family of Shaul, the tribe of Binyamin that became the original kings, and it moves into the dynasty of Yehuda, which will become the future Malchut from David onwards, right through till, please God, Mashiach. And the reality is that chapter 17 is just so famous, and as far as I always argue, so well known and yet not well known. We all know the story of David and Goliath. We've been accused over so many centuries, so many years now, that instead of being the David of the story where, with the small guy being attacked by the big guy, we've become the Goliath. This is what the world has accused us of. And it just doesn't make sense to me that they even do that. But the reality is the awareness of what this story is about. And what I want to try and show you is that David and Goliath, the story of David and Goliath, is not just the famous story that it is, but it is so much more. There's a context in which we need to understand. When I was teaching this in New York, the only way I could express it is by comparing it to a movie, as one does when you're teaching, American young women. And they were very happy to listen to the comparison to the story of the movie of Star Wars. I was talking about Star Wars #1, as opposed to Star Wars, I don't know what number they're up to or if they're still making those films, but whatever. And why do I call it Star Wars? Because David and Goliath is essentially the battle between good and evil. it represents an unbelievable representation here of what David is about and what Goliath is about. And why do I say this? Because just with a little bit of background, who are they? They're related. This is a bit of a shock to the system. David is descended from Ruth. Goliath is descended from Orpah, right? What happened when Orpah goes her way and Ruth goes her way with Naomi? Orpah goes back to the Philistine world that she came from. She's immediately molested by hundreds of men, it says, and out of that is born Goliath, right? From her very unfortunate lifestyle, which she went back to. And on the other side of the coin, you've got David, who is descended from Ruth, who stepped up into the Jewish world and became as she is called, the mother of royalty. So you've got, essentially, you've already got this kind of connection, which is a historical connection going back before they're even born. And they come together now in this amazing scenario, and it is an amazing scenario. And how this all plays out in the bigger picture is very much what this is about, because we are creating the Malchus. We're creating the kingship of the Jewish people. And to create it, it's got to be done not just in a significant way, but in a very unique way. So how are we creating this unique Malchus? By a story of David and Goliath, which on paper just doesn't make sense, right? You've got the big guy, the small guy. Where did he come from? Where did David come from to fight Goliath? Everything about it, as you will see when we go through this, is a representation of something much, much bigger. Now, again, that's kind of by way of introduction. It's very hard to introduce this without going through the psukim. We are not going to do it justice in 1 week. I'm going to have to split it into two sections, which I don't like doing, but it's a very long chapter, 57 psukim or something like that. So please allow me this little division, and part 2 will be in 2 weeks' time. I hope it gives you enough chesed to come back, and we'll see how part 2 works out. Let's have a look initially at part 1, ask some of the most obvious questions that we need to ask, and hopefully share with you some of the very delightful and amazing insights. I'm following particularly Yeshua Bachar, one of the great Bible teachers of the modern era. He died in 1996, was a very, very well-loved teacher, particularly Michlala in Yerushalayim. If any of you have relatives who studied in the Michlala in the 80s and 90s, they would know Rav Bachar. I remember I mentioned his name at a shir in YU, and half a dozen women came over to me afterwards, after the shir, and said, oh, he was our teacher. So people did know him from those days. Have a look at this, chapter 17, and it is truly amazing. Ve'asvu Pelishtim et machaneh milchama. Right, many of you, I think, have been to the location, the Emek Ha'ela, not far from it. The Pelishtim gathered their camp for war. Ve'asvu Socho shel Yehuda. They came to a place called Socho. Ve'yachanu bein Socho bein Azeka be'efes damim. What a depressing name of a place. Efes damim, no blood. I mean, I wouldn't like to live in a place with a name like that. I mean, with all due respect. But anyway, that's the name of the place. Efes damim, because there was no bloodshed. The rabbis say, in the end of the day, the war did not take place the way it was expected to happen, and therefore that's why it got the name Efes damim. Efes means zero blood, well, almost, except for Goliath. Pasuk bet. V'Shaul ve'ish Yisrael nesvu, and on one hand you've got Saul with all the men of Israel. Vayachanu be'emek ha'ela. This is the famous valley of Elah. Vayarchu milchama likrat plishtim, and they set up battle lines. So this was always going to be the traditional battle. If you've seen whatever movie you've seen of these types of battles, Braveheart or any movie like that, you can remember they all had battle lines. They shot at each other and then they charged each other. And that was the style of battle which had been around for many, many years. Gimel. Uplishtim omdim al ahar hazeh. Plishtim stand towards one side. Yisrael omdim al ahar mizeh, and they're standing on the other side. V'hagai beineim. There's a valley between them, and they're basically standing off, looking at each other, making faces at each other, making noises, shouting at each other. It's a pretty frightening scenario. And the battle did not happen immediately. This is the warm-up stage. Listen to this. Dalet. V'yesei isha beinai. Now here comes the big guy, and we're not even told his name at the beginning. He's immediately described. A man is beinayim, between. right? Bnei Yisrael. This is what the description is, and it's such a strange description. It's Ish Benam. So I'll read the translation. It's called here the champion. All right, it doesn't really help us with the translation because Beinayim means between. We'll see in a minute. Mimachanot Plishtim, from the camp of Plishtim, and we're told Goliath Shemo Migat, right? Those of you who know Kiryat Gat, down again, not far from here, about 45 minutes into the car, go down the road there, and this is all happening in that area. He comes from that part of the world. Govho Sheish Amot Vazeret. And we're immediately told how tall he is. Now, you've got to ask the obvious question, is this the most important factor that we need to know about Goliath, right? Maybe we need to know where he came from. We'll need to know, what he was saying, but immediately we're given a very, very amazing and detailed description of his height, of his strength. Everything about Goliath, I'm going to say, use the word, a Yiddish word based on the Hebrew word, is what we call gashmistic. Gashmistic means he's totally physical. The physicality of Goliath is literally off the charts. He's tall, 6 amot. 6 amot is around, 12 feet. I don't know. Go figure. He would have. Yeah, he's certainly, he's got a place in the basketball team. No question about that. And Posuk Hey, the Kova, and then we need to know about his hat. What do we need to know about his helmet? And again, it's all physicality. The Kova Nechoshet Arosho, and he had this copper helmet, the Shirion Kaskasim, and we're told about the coat of mail, the protective armor that he's wearing. Hu Lavush, Mishkal, again, we need to know the weight. Hashirion, 5,000 shkalim nechoshet, 5,000 shekel. All right, even in today, if you wore something that heavy, I don't think you could get it off the ground. And here's Goliath, and everything is over the top. It's physical, it's material, everything about him. And we've got even more. It just goes on. Umitzchat nechoshet al raglav, and he's got this some sort of leggings, or what they call greaves. They call them in English. I don't know what greaves are. Leggings, some covers, shin guards. If you play soccer. V'kidon nechoshet ben kteifav, and he's got this spear, this kind of javelin, some sort of spear which he has over his shoulder, between his shoulders, and then even that the description is extreme. The chetz chanito kimanor orgim, and we even need to know what it was like. It was like a weaver's beam, right? If you again can't really explain that, and if you go to like we did last summer, we went to Amish territory, then you can explain what a weaver's beam is. Those guys still use weaving machines, right? Although they pretty modern as well. I like the fact that their wagons have got lights on them finally, brake lights. That's really cute. I don't know how the horse connects to the brake lights. I was wondering about that. Anyway, doesn't matter. Shkali Baza, it's iron. When those say at Sinah, he's got a guy who has to carry the shield. This poor fellow, I don't know who it was, and he's schlepping this shield and obviously struggling, I suspect. So this is the description, extreme physicality. Beinayim, just to read to you some of the interpretations of Beinayim, which I've got here from Rabbi. He says, what is Beinayim? So it's a whole Gemara, just a little bit of background. Beinayim, it says, Rashi says, Matukanu Manuka. He was a perfect example of the physicality. He was like the weightlifter, the boxer, Muhammad Ali, the perfect physical example. That's one opinion. Shmuel says, no. Beinoni means Shebachav. He was the middle brother. Okay, and there were 4 of them. As I said to my wife, that must have been for the midwife a real challenge. 4 Goliaths in one family, and then feeding the guys. I mean, it was a big challenge. And of course, they were in the local American football team. I mean, God help them. God help the other team. The Be'er of Shid, and there's another opinion. Asui kabinyan. He's made like a building. Whoa. Okay. They sometimes describe people like that. Usually in the WWF, if you know what I mean. Rabbi Yochanan says Bar Mea Pape, and this is a very horrible explanation, that he was born from Beinai, means from between all the men that had relations with Orpah when she left the fold. He's the product of all those relations that his mother eventually had, whether it was Orpah, whether it was a descendant. It's a whole description. Whichever description you go for here, it's clearly all about the physical. As I said, Goliath represents the physical world, right? This is the holy versus the profane. This is the secular versus the Kodesh. It's extreme. And again, even this description of his spear and his equipment is just so extreme. And it's all there to emphasize that this is a battle not of essentially a normal war situation between two armies, but this is a battle between someone who represents the physical world, the all with all its drawbacks, and David comes along. He's almost wearing no armor. You'll see there's a whole discussion about whether Shaul wants to give him his armor, which he turns around and says, no thanks, but no thanks. He can't wear it, even though there's a nace that's involved with it. It's a whole story there. And David comes along, and what has he got? A little stone, a sling, and he is the epitome of spirituality. He comes b'shem Hashem. And we'll see that, in fact, this becomes a very significant discussion as we go along. Just going to do a few more psukim, because we have to ask the very, very famous question, which comes up now in verse 8. Pasuk Chet. V'yamod v'yikra el marchot Yisrael. He's standing there and he's calling out to the Jewish army. This is Goliath. V'yomer lahem, and he says, Lama teitzu laroch milchama. We can end this very easily. We don't need a war. Why are you standing there? He's mocking them. He says, Halo anochi ha-pelishti. The guy for this guy is incredible, the ego. He says, I am the Pelishti. Remember, I explained Pelishti means in Hebrew, Polesh, the invader, right? I am the guy who literally, I've been around. You know who I am, because he already appeared in other stories. Remember the story when the ark was captured, the rabbis say, who captured the ark and who killed the sons of Eli? It was Goliath. He'd already made his mark on the Jewish people, and they knew exactly who he was. So he says, I am the Plishti, the one you know, and you are a bunch of slaves to your king. And what has he done for you? Bring a person that he should come down to me, right? In other words, get someone to fight. The king should be the one who's fighting, but look at him, he's cowering over there, and the king was petrified. The Ramban brings it very, very amazingly. He says that there is a halakha, which is codified, that if a person is petrified before a war, he's excused the war, right? It says that if someone is yorei, if he leads the rest of the army to become afraid, because he's afraid, he's shaking, his legs are shaking literally, he doesn't go to war. And what is he afraid of? And the rabbis say he's afraid mityarei me'aveirot biyado. He's afraid of his sins. And Goliath is saying to the Jewish people, Saul, and he seems to know the weak point. He knows the button to press over here. And he's saying that Saul is a coward. The king has done, and they knew that the king did not kill Amalek. This became well known. The king did not carry out the whole situation until Shmuel came along. All of this became well known, and Goliath understands this. He seems to have an awareness. It almost goes back to the days of Bilam. Bilam understood, how do you fight the Jews? Right, at the end of the day, and thank God the enemy today, I don't think they get this, but we know it very well, that at the end of the day, we have this extra dimension in our arsenal, and it's called tefillah, and it's called connecting to God. And you know, when you see the Torah, you see the purity of the army. Our grandson who was here, we just had the bar mitzvah, and he went to the Netzach Yehuda base, and they lit Hanukkah lights. And this is the army that is vilified all around the world. And this is an army that was dancing with this 13-year-old boy. He'd had such a positive experience. It was amazing. It was truly, I wasn't there, my wife was there, and it was really something. And this is the kedusha of the army that we are blessed with. And this is a point which Goliath seems to have understood, because he's going to come along and try and belittle it. Firstly, he belittles the king. And if he hasn't got away with that, then he'll start belittling the people. And you'll see how he belittles them. It's shocking. Look at Pasuk Tet. He throws down the gauntlet, as they say. He makes a deal with them. He says, if this your champion can come and beat me, all of the army will, all of the Philistines will be your slaves, which in fact, in reality, is not going to happen. They're going to run away, right? Like we read today, Hamas are already preparing to run away from Gaza. I read a story today. I don't know if it's true, but I hope it's true. And if I can win the battle, then you'll be our slaves, so it's a one-on-one deal. So we ask the obvious question, Ribono Shalom, which war ever in the history of warfare was mano al mano? Which one was ever like that? The Barbanel asked the question. So he says, the Barbanel is always very cute, 14th century Spain. He says, I had a chat with my non-Jewish friends, because he had a lot of non-Jews that he actually spoke to on the Bible. And one of his non-Jewish friends came back to him and said, oh, this is like what we do. We have pistols at dawn. If you have a big argument with someone, you agree to have a duel and you shoot it out, right? You see this in the movies, but it was for real at once upon a time. So Barbanel says, very, very simply, he says that's absolute. His expression of it is ma'aseh ta'atuim. He says that's a bubba ma'aseh. He said it was nothing to do with pistols at dawn. It was nothing to do with a duel. The reality was this is something much more significant. It is the ultimate moment when Shaul comes to realize that there's something else happening in the Jewish people. The people come to realize that they're getting a new leader. The people come to realize that our strength is not always going to be in our physicality. We do need to fight physical battles, but our strength, we fight in the name of God. And this is why this story is just so magnificent. Because when David comes along, I'm going to use the word naivete. His original naivety is breathtaking. He's seeing the Jews cowering under this gentleman, Goliath's taunts and mocking, and he doesn't understand what's going on. He says, why are you doing this? Listen to this. We'll go do the psukim. Listen to this. Pasuk Yud. He says, I'm mocking you today. I taunt you today. And he's getting more aggressive. Send your champion and we will fight. And Vayishma Shaul, and this is the ultimate put down of Shaul, the Chol Yisrael, not only Shaul, all of the Israel heard, Divrei Plishti Ha'ele, they heard what this Philistine was saying. And he's lost his name by now. He's the Plishti because his physicality is what he's all about. It's not about his name. It's about what he represents. And Vayechatu Vayiramod, you can't get a more damaging double expression. Vayiramod means to be afraid. Very afraid. Vayechatu is on top of that to even be more afraid. It's a double whammy. So the fear is so palpable in the Jewish ranks, they're shaking in their boots. This one man is destroying the Jewish army. Now, that's a scenario, you've got a split screen on the TV film, and this is all happening on the right-hand side of the movie. On the left-hand side of the movie, we've got Davidul, and he is doing his thing, and we'll see what's going to happen with him. Because there is a second scenario which has got to take place, not just the war scenario, but there's also got to be the David scenario, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. Look at this, Pasuk Yud Bet, and this is phenomenal. And again, the question is going to be staggering. So again, question number one we asked: what sort of war is this? And I'm suggesting it's not a real battle between A and B, but it's a battle of forces. Star Wars. It's between the powers of good and the force of evil. And may the force be with you. This is it. Yud Bet. Listen to this. The David ben Ish Ephrati Azev. So we're going to go back over David. If already we're describing Goliath in his physicality, how do we describe David? Ish Ephrati Hazeh. He's the son of the Ephrati. We're not even told how tall he was. Not even told how broad-shouldered. We know that he's not. His physical attributes were very limited. He became a very great warrior, right? Did he go to the gym or not go to the gym? I don't know. But the reality was he knew how to fight the battles of God. So his strength was in a different direction. But listen, but David ben Ish Ephrati, phenomenal story. Azeb, Beit Lechem Yud, he's come from Beit Lechem. Shmo Yishai, who was his father? Yishai. We know all this, but we're stressing because David is coming from a world of spirituality. His father is Yishai. Yishai was the God Lador. Yishai was the man who says, the rabbis say he had hundreds of followers. who would come and listen to his shiurim, to his divrei Torah. That was Yishai. V'lo shmone banim, and he had 8 sons. V'yish b'yimei Shaul zakein baba anashim, and already in the day of Shaul, he was already aging. He was already, reaching his senior, his golden years, as they call them today. And at this point, we know the war. There's a call up, and amazingly, people megayes, they actually went to the army. His 3 eldest sons. They followed Shaul. The king says, you got to come to war. You go to war. And we're now told who they are. And this is significant, as you'll see in a minute. The 3 sons that went to war. Eliav, Abachor, this is Eliav, who really thinks a lot of himself, as you will see. Umishnei Avinadav, the second one was called Avinadav. Vashlishi Shama. Now, they're already in the army. Now, what's David doing over here? But David, who Hakatan, we know told David is, again, we said this last time, may not be the youngest, but he's certainly the smallest of stature. He was sidelined. He was Even Mosu Abonim. Remember, we said that he was pushed out of the family. He was put into the fields where he wrote a lot of the Tehillim. He communed with God, and all this sort of discussion that we had before. And Shloshet HaGadolim Holcha Achrei Shaul, the young one stayed behind, and the 3 big ones went with Shaul. Now, the David Holech V'Shav Me'al Shaul, we know that David was already connected to Shaul. He was playing music for him. He was his music therapist, as we would call it today. Lirot et son aviv Beit Lechem, and he would go from the king back to the sheep, but he would be commuting. That was his job. At this point, Vayigash haplishti ashkeim v'hareb. They throw in this point, which is really significant. His attacks, again, back to the screen on the other side. The Philistine, meaning Goliath, is now hashkeim v'hareb. He's increasing the pressure, morning and evening. You'll say to me, what does that mean? So Rashi points out something extraordinary. Omer Rabbotein, the rabbis say, Kedei levatla mikriyat Shema. Here are the Jews trying to daven. We're standing there in the morning, and this disgusting human being, we're trying to say Shema Yisrael and pray to God. He's throwing insults and who knows what at the Jewish people, and they can't even daven. He knows how to hit them where it really hurts. He's not in any way attacking their weapons. He's not in any way attacking their battle lines or anything like that. He's attacking their ability to say Shema Yisrael. Unbelievable. And of course, that's Hashkem in the morning, V'Harev in the evening. Twice a day, as we do. We say Shema twice a day. But not only that, how long did this goading take place? Arba'im Yom, 40 days. Not by chance, right? He knew 40 days. This was significant. Moshe Rabbeinu went to receive the Torah. He was up there for 40 days. So all of this numbering and all of this toing and froing that Goliath is involved with is something more than just antagonism. There is calculated focus on what he's doing. So that's the right hand of the screen. Now we're going to go back to the left hand of the screen. And we're going to ask question number 2. Right? Question number 1, what sort of battle was it? I hope we've answered that. We're seeing now it's a much bigger concept than just one-on-one. Number 2, here comes a real pella. Look what happened. Pasuk Yud Zayin. Vayomer Yishai leDavid beno. Yishai says to David, and this is unbelievable. I know we like to eat, and I know we're good on food, but this is the middle of a war, right? And David is the one of the younger sons, and Yishai, the father, is saying to David, they need a bit of food. Go and take a care package, a doggy bag. I'll tell you what to take. Kachno la'achecha eifata kali. Go and get an ephah of corn, which is a measure, v'asara lechem hazeh, and go to the bakery around the corner, a very nice bakery here, and take 10 loaves of bread, v'horetza machaneh la'achecha, and run to the camp. And not only that, v'taseret charitzei chalav. Go and get some cheese from the local makolet, right? 10 whatever things of cheese. I don't know how to describe it here. 10 cheeses, thank you. Aritzim, the way they used to package them. And he's saying not only that, Tavil Saha Allah, take it to the captain, so that you can give him a little bit of an extra, sort of, I don't know, is it a bribe? Is it to make it easier for the boys to they'll get on better with the officer if the officer's getting a food package. And v'etachecha tifkod l'shalom, go to see your brothers, v'et arubatam tika, and find out about them, what's going on. Now, with all due respect, this is a major war. This is just about to take place between the Plishtim and the Jews. And here's Yishai, who is not without seichel, certainly got a lot of sense, and he's one of the great leaders of the generation. And he's saying to David, go to the local makolet, pack some provisions, and go to the front line and take it to your. When David gets there, we're talking here. Remember, he's coming from Beit Lechem, so we know the geography. Going from Beit Lechem down to Kiryat Gad, as it will be today, or somewhere in that area. Yeah, that's it won't take him 5 minutes to get down there. And by the time he gets to the war may have kicked off. So what in the name of whatever is Yishai thinking over here? What is Yishai doing by sending his son into the front line? It doesn't make sense. And the comparison has to be made between Yishai and, somebody help me out here, who sent a son into an impossible situation? Sorry? Yaakov sent Yosef. And it's so comparable. And when we make this comparison, it will explain to us everything. And I'll tell you what I mean. It's one of the handouts that I sent out, but I'll paraphrase it very, very briefly. Yaakov sends Yosef. We read it a few weeks ago. The brothers don't like the Yosef, right? He's a dreamer, and he makes all the comments and however you want to deal with that problem. And the rabbis are very useful in trying to explain it away. The reality is, we know in the end of the day, they were not as convivial maybe as they should have been. And they showed their lack of love for their brother by tying him up and, shipping him off to Egypt, which really, although they didn't kill him directly, was certainly indirect death sentence. There was no way initially that Yosef should, on paper, should have survived. But he does. But reality is, the question is asked, why did Yaakov send Yosef in the first place? What is he doing? He says to Yosef, go to your brothers to visit them. And Yaakov is not a fool. He knows that they hate it. He knows that, certainly, maybe not hate is the right word, but he knows that they're not exactly on the same page. They're not really full of joy and happiness with towards Yosef, and he still sends him. And it's very strange. And the same thing's going on over here. Yishai is sending David. The three brothers, remember from the story of the anointment, they were not happy with David. When David gets the oil put on his head, Eliav and the others, we are told they're pretty shocked about the whole thing, even though it's en famille at the moment. It's not, it's just amongst themselves. But the reality is, why is Yishai sending David to the front line? And there is a very significant expression, and this again is phenomenal insight. With Yosef, the expression that is used is that he is sent me'emek Chevron. His father sends him from the valley of Hebron. Now, I don't know if any of you have been to Hebron recently or at any time, but the way that I would not describe Hebron is a valley. When you go in the car, you're going up and up and up. My brother-in-law was here for Shabbat. He told me that in Dania, which is on the way to Hebron, they already had snow last week. So they're pretty up in the mountains over there. It wasn't very much snow, but it was something. So their temperature is clearly colder than here. So what does it mean when the Pasuk tells us that Yosef was sent from the valley of Hebron? What valley are you talking about? So the rabbis come along, and you'll see in a minute, there's the same word Emek appears over here as well. The valley is a play on words. Emek comes from the Lashon Omek, something which is deep, something which is in the bowels of the earth, if you want to call it that. What does that mean? So the rabbis explain that, in fact, Emek Hebron is actually, Emek means the depth of those who are in Hebron. Who's represented in Hebron? The Avot. When Yosef was sent to the brothers, it was part of the original scheme of history, of Jewish history, that the brothers were going to take Yosef and send him to Egypt. It had to happen. Why did it have to happen? Because we had to go down to Egypt. Otherwise, we wouldn't be eating matzah. I mean, we can all complain about that. But the reality is, he went to Egypt and we had Pesach. And that's the reality of it. With Yosef not going to Egypt, Yaakov would not have gone to Egypt. The Jews would not have gone down to Egypt. And the whole Jewish history would not have worked out in the way that it actually worked out. It had to happen. So the rabbis say Emek Hebron means not a geographical location, but it's referring to God. It's saying from the depths of the advice of those who live in Hebron, meaning the Avot who represent God represented God in this world, they are now in a situation of where explaining to us why Yosef had to go to the brothers, because it became the catalyst for Yosef to go down to Egypt. If you understand it in that point, and I praise it, and if you got the book, read the book, because I go into it in much more detail. The reality of it is that this is the same story here. Yishai had to send David to the front line. And it's almost as if Yishai doesn't explain why. And it's almost, I can argue, and this is again what Rabbi argues, Yishai didn't even understand why. But he has this kind of premonition. David has got to go to the front line. So he makes up a story, take a bit of nash and take some snacks and take a bit of this and take a bit of that. And you'll go and you'll find out how your brothers are. And he uses this interesting word, arubatam. What does that arubatam mean? And again, there's a long discussion about this, but I'll tell you something extraordinary. Some say arubatam just literally means the concept of array, to be a guarantor, to be worried about somebody else. Find out how they are, right? And this is the word array, which again is in modern Hebrew exactly the same word. I always tell the story that when you came in Aliyah in the old days, in the 80s, there was something called Bank Idud. There was a bank which was for the Olim. It doesn't exist today. I think it was disbanded a long time ago. But one of the conditions to get a loan was that you had to bring 2 arivim. Never translated it. So a guy turns up to the bank with 2 arivim, with 2 Arabs, because he misread it. He said, "I've got to bring 2 Arabs." He didn't realize arivim also means guarantors. And it's a apocryphal story, but apparently it really did happen. How he found 2 Arabs, I don't know, but it's a true story. So this word arav means the idea of a guarantee. It's a guarantor. So what is going on here? So says Rabbi something, I mean, you can weep when you read this stuff. He says like this, he says, let's go back into Jewish history. He says, we know, and we're back to the brothers, because it all comes from the brothers. We know the rule is, there is a concept, Maseh Avot Siman Lamanim. What happens in early Jewish history is repeated over and over again. Ein Chadash Tachas Hashem, right? We say this very often. So what happened with the brothers? The brothers were in a situation where, after all of the comings and goings to Egypt, finally Yosef engineers it that Binyamin is coming down to Egypt. So who stands up eventually to the father and says, I am going to be responsible for Binyamin? Yehuda. Yehuda stands up and says, I will be take responsibility. Because if we do not go back to Egypt with Binyamin, this guy over there who's making all the trouble, he's not going to give us food, and we're going to have all the problems. So of course, Yaakov has got no choice. He has to send Binyamin. But Yehuda makes a condition. He says, I will be personally responsible for his safety, for his welfare. And that becomes a commitment for the rest of Jewish history. There is this concept of something which in English is called a historical guarantee. It's a phenomenal concept. Because when you think about it, where are we all coming from today? Essentially from 2 tribes. We come from the tribe either of Yehuda or Yehudim, or we're from Binyamin, which was remaining after the other 10 tribes were exiled. Do we have remnants of the other tribes? Yeah, we do. The Ethiopians come from the tribe of Dan, according to their tradition. There are other B'nai Menashe are now coming from India, and I think they're also claimed to be from whatever tribe it is. But the reality is the 10 tribes, for want of a better description, are gone. We today are Yehuda and Binyamin. That's who's left. And we are a product of that historical commitment which took place thousands of years ago. Yehuda looks out for Binyamin. And where does it become so powerful in the story of Purim? Because Mordechai is Mordechai HaYehudi, so he's from Yehuda, and he's also Ish Yemini Binyamin. He represents both in the same person. And you need the Binyamin and Yehuda combination to fight Amalek. We're back to Shaul. Shaul failed. Yehud, along comes Mordechai later on in history, and he's going to try and make up. Agagi go against Amalek, representing Agag, the king that was represented over here in the book of Shmuel. We've got this historical continuum which is going on. Starts with the Avot, goes through the children, the tremendous stories that we have of the 12 tribes, and then becomes a paradigm in Jewish history. Aru batam tikach, says Yishai to David, you will become Aru batam. You're going to be the guarantor of Shaul. Because Shaul is Benjamin, you're Yehuda. And if we are going to succeed against this enemy, this formidable enemy represented by the physicality that he does represent, then we need this combination of Yehuda and Binyamin. And although Shaul is cowering and Shaul cannot bring himself to do what he has to do, once David turns up, the whole situation takes on a completely different complexion. It goes completely in a different direction. And this is the Arubatam. Some, just to add, Arubatam, some say that, and there's an interesting suggestion, that he was taking money to the boys, that they had to pay for their weapons. Right? Imagine there's an army where the soldiers would have to pay for their guns. Thank God today, we're in a situation where Uncle Sam generally pays for our guns, whatever it is. But in those days, they had to pay for their own weapon. There's some say it was a bill of divorce that they had to give their wives when they went to war. There's a lot of discussion about it. But this idea of the historical guarantee, I think, is overwhelming. That here you've got a fantastic description here. Yishai is sending David to fulfill the historical obligation established years, hundreds of years before these two lived, in the story of Yosef and Binyamin. And this is now what is going to carry on right through the story. I don't know, we have a few minutes. I'm just going to take it to about halfway in the chapter, and I'm going to leave you with one question to think about, Bezrat Hashem, that we will continue in 2 weeks' time. Pasuk Yutet, V'Shaul v'hem avish Yisrael be'emek ha'ela. So they're on one side. We're still back to the war. We've gone back to the other screen. Milchamim apish, and all of a sudden they're beginning to shoot at each other. V'yashkeim David baboker. You gotta love this guy. He gets up early in the morning. Whenever that phrase is used, we know it's important, right? Avram got up early in the morning, and many people got up early in the morning, but it's not just getting up early in the morning, it's la'avodat Hashem, it's to do something in the name of God. Vayitoshet atzon al shomer, he even makes sure that the flocks are looked after. Vayisa, this is verse 20, Vayisa vayelech kasher tziva Yishai, Yishai told him to go. Vayavar ma'agala, there was some sort of circle, the camp behind the front line was an encampment. And the soldiers were going to the encampment, and the noise, he could hear the true, either the trumpets or the shouting or whatever it was. And David saw these lines, and he saw what was going on. And Pasuk Kafbet, and he can't believe his ears. Firstly, whatever he's carrying, he puts down. He's very careful about his position to be responsible for whatever he's got. Al Yad Shomer Kelim, to the guard there. Vayarad Samarach, and he runs to the front line. Vayavav Yishal Echav L'Shalom, and he wants to know, my brothers, how are you? And of course, they're saying, what? With all due respect, Pitzkala, what are you doing here, right? And Kaf Gimel Vahuma Dabeimam is talking. And this man gets up from the other side of the enemy. Goliath plishti shemo migat marot Israel. Some say marchot Israel. He's coming from the lines of the plishtim. And there's a whole again. This is talking about, again, it's stressing his physicality, because he was born out of this very, very unpleasant relationship that he came from his mother's consorting with so many men. And this is the ultimate praise. Vayishma David, he heard it. One gets the feeling that there was a level of understanding, of listening with David that is extraordinary. And he's a young guy. I mean, according to Chazal, he's 28 years old. Okay, I'll give him a little bit of maturity. But he's still, he's not King David yet, but he hears it and he can't stand it. Kaf Daled, V'chol Yisrael birotam et ha'ish. When everybody else saw ha'ish, meaning Goliath, they were afraid. Do you see this ish? They give him ish, it was always an expression of importance, as if he's the most important thing because he's so formidable. He's coming to mock us. And they're talking amongst themselves. Whoever kills him, Yashrenu HaMelech Rosh Gadol, will be rewarded by the king with wealth. And he'll marry into the family. And even his family will become free. In other words, you will say today he gets no taxes, right? He can move to Florida, no state tax. And Vayomer David, I just want to get to this passage. David said, I've got to just check. Are you right? What happens if somebody kills him? And he's doing it because of the attack on the Jewish people. Who is this Philistine? There's a living God, and he's making fun of us, and he's mocking us. Who is he to do such a thing? And this is David standing there looking at all of the army and saying to himself, and saying it out loud, what are you guys doing? So they told him what they were just talking about, and you'll see the brother here, and we're going to come back to this Be'ezrat Hashem next time. I'm going to leave you with one question. David goes to the king, to Shaul, and Shaul knows him because, as I said, he's his music therapist. So he says to the king, and there's an expression over here which we'll have to discuss. Did he go willingly, David, or was he taken by to the king? We'll see the whole story. But basically, the king offers him his armor, and David, with all due respect, says no. And the question, therefore, really is, what's going on here? Right? You can already answer the question with what we said this evening. David realizes that this is not a battle of strength, human strength. This is a battle of spirituality, a spiritual value versus the most physical attack on the Jewish people that existed essentially from the days of Amalek till now. And David realizes that if I go in with all this armor of the king looking like a knight of the realm, he says that's all going to be all well and good, but it's absolutely going to be useless because that's not what this is about. Vayishma David, that's the expression to take away. He listened. The great art of human connection is very often not about being able to say something, but being able to hear, to listen to what the other person is saying. And in this case, David was the heartbeat of Am Yisrael. He was hearing what the Jewish people were saying. And as I said, I don't know, I'm getting very excited about this chapter, but it's such a phenomenal, if you're lucky enough to teach this chapter, it's one thing. I hope that I try to convey to you the excitement, the fear, the trepidation, and at the same time, the excitement. And this is a chapter, I hope that they're studying, before they go into battle. The Rosh Yeshiva very often visit their Hesder boys. They go and they study with them. Sometimes they learn Gemara with them. This will be a fantastic chapter to learn with all the army, because just to get that sense of you're not just fighting a physical enemy. They represent physicality with their rockets and all the evil that they represent. We're coming at them with something completely different. And if we understand that, then we can win this war. Please God, we'll win all the war. Because there's in the end of the day, we represent, as he says here, the ranks of the living God. And I think this is so, so phenomenal, so important. TBC, to be continued. We'll end the part 1, to be continued, Mr. Hashem, part 2. 2 weeks' time. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you so much.